Welcome to 100 Days of Trailhead, where the tech community comes to learn Salesforce, learn tech, get inspired, and invest in ourselves. We are your trail guides, here to support you on your learning journey. We release videos weekly. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a video. In the description below, you can find links for everything we mention in this video, as well as books and resources we found useful. Visit our blog, 100daysoftrailhead.com, for other helpful Salesforce and tech content. Do you have a lot of dependencies in your data? Do you have dirty data and want to know best practices from a technical architect's point of view? In this video, Grace Buchanan discusses how to approach your data dependencies, and gotchas. Grace Buchanan is a technical architect who leads teams of 50-plus developers while analyzing and designing complex enterprise systems. Grace reads lots of books but rarely finishes them. She is part of a heavy metal band and has participated in stand-up and improv comedy. Your quest, should you choose to take it, is to journey with us to learn how to best work with your organization's data. Your quest begins now.
Now, I will preface this by saying that PowerPoint is my least favorite application. It is my least favorite thing. When I was a trainer decades ago, as punishment, my training manager would make me teach PowerPoint, which was just dreadful. So to cover, you need to know your data. You need to know your schema. You have to ask yourself to clean or not to clean. It's a different question than you ask your teenagers. We then will talk about parents first, because that is important and parents matter. This is something I do talk about with my teenager. Then we'll talk about some tools that are out and about that you might run across. We'll talk about some gotchas, and then have some time for Q&A. Now, along the way, I may stop and ask you all some questions, or if you have any questions, my 2020, I sat for them. One of the ever attended brainy, geeky knowledge. My role at work, I'm the soup master, everything from the UI to the complex integrations and batch integrations and security issues on the back end, and PERS, I've decided to call them. And who have certifications or who think they're certifiable and want other types. And I am a teenage daughter. Any and all advice is welcome. Prayers, thoughts, candles as well. Not safe for work, but we can discuss that later. What else did I put on here? Oh, I read a lot of books and I don't often finish them. And if I get better from this cold, I will be cooking a brisket for the first time on Friday for my holiday party that I'm having at the house. So we'll see how well that goes.
I'll be right over.
Okay, that would be awesome. My friend who is a chef who generally does cook for Christmas has to take his daughter to a meeting, so I'm cooking. This will be awesome. This will be super fun. All right, so that's a little bit about me. So I like inspirational messages. I like inspirational messages from women, by women, to women. And since we're talking about data and moving data into Salesforce, one must have a plan. And since I like soccer, my first inspirational quote is from Mia Hamm. The backbone of success is hard work, determination, good planning, and perseverance. I have also printed this out and put this into my daughter's room as she struggles through 8th grade algebra. She's not a soccer kid, she's a theater kid, but the message still applies. Okay, so when you're starting to think about loading data into Salesforce, you really need to have an understanding of your data. So what is your data? Is your data just regular boring text? Is it names? Is it numbers? Is it addresses? Where does it live? What systems hold that data? What does it look like? Who is responsible for that data, or who is in that data? When do you want to do your extract? When do you want to do your loads? And why? Why are we bringing this data in to begin with? These are some of the questions that we need to talk about. And again, these are things that I talk to my junior developers, offshore developers, senior developers, even have arguments with other tech arcs about this as well. So first off, let's know your data. So when you're working in a project, and say you're assigned as a tech lead, and Rachel's going to be my tech lead, and I've said we've got a project to deal with seeding some data into a large Salesforce organization. One of the first things she's going to say is, "Hey, where's this data come from? What are the sources for this data?" It could be a single data source like an MDM system. It could be it's likely going to be multiple sources. It's very likely you'll be bringing data in from other databases, possibly other Salesforce orgs, from Excel spreadsheets. I've had to do extracts from Exchange, which is kind of a nightmare. They could be in spreadsheets, especially when you're talking with smaller organizations that are getting digitized or onto the platform for the first time. They have spreadsheets and spreadsheets of data, and they want you to take care of it. They want you to organize it and automatically put it into Salesforce. So consider all of your sources and include things like lookup or reference tables. This is a gotcha that can bite you in the toe towards the end. If you do an extract, say, of a contact table in an old CRM, and it may have a lookup to a reference table that holds states and countries or even zip codes. And if you don't take that extract as well, then you're going to be left with just a bunch of foreign key IDs that don't mean anything. And then the last place that we always forget to look is at people's brains. Because you can give me a data extract and say, "Hey, Grace, use data loader and toss this up into the org." Okay, but I don't know what that data means. I don't understand, what does this number mean? What does that value mean? What is a gross income versus a net income? What is FTD and YTD and ABC? What do all of these things mean? And unless I have that context, and until I talk to the people who have that context, and that I'm enlightened, then I won't have a snowball's chance in Florida of getting this data loaded correctly. So it's super important that you know your data. And if you don't know your data, get someone who does know your data. Now, the next part is what? So you've got this extract. You've got this awesome CSV file that has 250,000 records, and you're like, "Great! I'm ready to load my data." Well, not really. You need to have an understanding of what those fields contain. And this is going to help you with your data mapping. So you've got this extract, but you don't know, are these values string or text? I'll give you my favorite example, and I'll even put this out to you all. If you're creating a table for contacts, and you're not on the Salesforce platform, so you're doing this in something super fun like MySQL. What data type are you going to choose for zip code? Rachel's going, I know. Anyone want to take a gander?
Just put it.
I'm going to do a string so that leading zeros don't get dropped.
Yes! You must either live in Canada or on the East Coast.
I got family on the East Coast. You got it.
That was it's one of my favorite examples. I was working with, this is years ago, I was working with some developers in the Boston area, and they kept wondering why the mail was going somewhere in Pennsylvania. And they were insisting it was a problem with the system. And of course it wasn't. It was that the field type for the zip code was set to a numeric value. So it was stripping off the leading zeros. And then for all of our Canadian friends who have alphanumeric zip codes, they weren't getting any of their data. So having an understanding of the data that you're putting in there and what that data is and what it represents is really important. We also need to have an understanding of all of the relationships between the data, because it's not going to be as simple as give me an extract of this one table from system A and I'm going to put it into one table in system B. It's never that easy. There are so many relationships you need to consider and to back this will not be able to hold all of our data. So we are limited to only loading 1 million records into that back-end database. 20% will be figure out these filter criteria. Is it active? One party was saying, well, let's just pull all of the active customers. Well, that's still, out of 19 million, that's still 10 million. And then somebody said, well, let's just pull all the customers whose names begin with A, B, and C. Well, that's just silly. We had somebody else say, well, pull all of the active customers who have their first name is this and their last name is something else, so they get a random selection. Or only customers from California, or only customers from New York. So when you're looking at seeding a database, whether it's Salesforce or something else, you have to be really cognizant of the amount of space that you have and ask yourself, what data are you bringing in? So in this case, we're not going to be pulling in all the customers, but a subset. Another thing we need to think about, when you're loading data into Salesforce, you're going to be loading users. And as you know, all records need to have an owner, and we don't want that owner to just be system. So we want it to be an actual owner. So there may be cases where your data is owned by a user who is no longer active. Maybe she's gone on to something bigger and better. Maybe she's switched jobs. Who knows? But that user record is no longer active, but we still need to load up that record. So these are some of the gotchas that you're going to be thinking about. But it could be that you're going to pull in not only active users or active customers, but you may have to bring in inactive records as well in order for them to be parented correctly. And then we have a when. How long back do you want to go to grab your data? Are you going to seed Salesforce with 5 years of data, with 10 years of data? This is usually where your InfoSec people, the security people get involved and legal gets involved, and they like to say, oh, we need to have 7 years of data. And that's when you kick it on up to a TA or to the governing body to say, what is your determination? How many years do we need? And that informs your full data set. So for this particular client that I'm dealing with, we will be pulling all active customers. So we've got 19 million active customers that we're going to be pushing into the database, and that is over all time. Okay, and their customers deactivate if they're not active, if they don't place any orders or have any business over a certain amount of time. Another thing we need to consider is when you're pushing data, you're often going to do this in several different mock runs or trial runs. So you'll be running several different loads. You might be doing several different extracts from your source systems and then several different loads into Salesforce. But when you finally do that push just before go live, your data, because of the nature of our data, it's going to be old as soon as you extract it, right? It's kind of like us. I'm as young as I am right now. I'll never be this young again. So as soon as you pull that data tomorrow, it's going to be stale. So you have to have a plan for pushing up your Delta data. And Delta data is any new records that have come in since your extract, or any changes to that data. And of course, you're going to have rules that help guide you to do that. Any new data that falls within these parameters, or any data that has changed within these interesting parameters. And so you'll want to be thinking about pushing your Delta data. Or, as I said, poosing Delta data. Someone clearly did not spell check this for me. And finally, why? Actually, this should have been the first question. Sometimes your data is not needed. Sometimes, especially when you're talking about projects where you're replacing a CRM or you're replacing system A with system B, there's a tendency for everyone to want to move everything. Sometimes it's not needed. Sometimes you don't have to move anything. Sometimes you want to start with a clean slate, and maybe you have some integration processes that are set up that will start to bring in and build up your data set in Salesforce over time, ensuring that you have clean data. So is it necessary to bring 15 years of orders when you're not going to be using them, maybe you just bring in 15 months of orders or 15 days of orders. Does the data need to live in Salesforce? Because we know that Salesforce data is not cheap. Does it need to live in Salesforce, or can we access it via integration, either batch or real time? There could be a UI mashup, could be living in external objects, but is it important for us to have that data in Salesforce? And there are several different ways that you can think about that question. So once you get a handle on your data and what your data is, what it looks like and how it's structured, you then need to turn to the left and say, all right, what does our Salesforce schema look like? What objects do we have? What are the fields that are already built? What are the relationships, the validation rules that are already built in play? What are my restrictions for that data? Or if you've got a brand new org and you can create it yourself, you've got a bunch of different questions to ask. What do I need? What objects do I need? What fields do I need? Can I use the asset object, or do I need to create my own custom object to support this? And when you're in either situation, whether you're working with a fresh org or an existing org, you want to consider your reporting structures as well. In this particular project that I'm talking about, reporting is going to be a bit of a challenge when you've got 19 million records in a single table. So how are we going to handle that? How are we going to handle searching on such a large volume of data? How are we going to handle reporting? What kind of reports are needed? What kind of analytics do we want to be able to produce for desktop and mobile? And how do we structure our data schema so that it can handle those functional needs? And once you get a good understanding of your target system and your source, this is going to allow you to create a really decent data map. And everyone loves a data map. And everyone hates to update a data map. But it is so critical that that remains a living document throughout the life of your project. If you add a field onto an object, make sure you update your data map. All right, and I'll pause right here and see if we've got any questions as we pause for inspirational message number 2. The question isn't who's gonna let me, it's who's gonna stop me. So I'm gonna stop my own self and see if we've got any questions quite yet. It's also a shameless plug for me to drink my tea.
Any questions, ladies? Doesn't seem like it at this time.
Oh my God, you guys are an easy bunch. Okay, when moving, how many of you have moved in the last 5 years? Probably a whole lot of us. I moved to this, I'm in a new house. We've been here 3 years. And I have been making this analogy of moving into a new Salesforce org is like moving into a new house. I've been making this analogy for years. And when it was actually time for me to move into my new house, I did what every single one of my clients has ever done when they're moving into a new Salesforce org. I boxed up the crap and I shipped it over. I did not clean it. I made an attempt. Okay, I made an attempt at cleaning. This is not me sorting my books. This is me thinking, oh, I should sort my books and I should get rid of more than what I have. It's always a great idea to clean your data. Everyone, when customers move from old system A to new system B, one of the most common problems that they have or their complaints is that, oh, the data is so bad. Nobody trusts the data. Once we get into Salesforce, the data will be all fine. And then I'll say, okay, great. How is it going to be all fine? Are you going to clean it up? Well, no, you're going to do that. Oh, I'm going to do that? Let me tell you about what happened when I moved from my old house to my new house. I didn't do that very well. If you're going to take your old crap and move it to your new house, it's still going to be old crap. So what kind of old stuff do they have? Well, they've got bad data, right? They've got Grace Buchanan in their system 17 times, and my name is spelled differently all of the time. They never bothered updating every time I got a new address, so I'm in there multiple times with all my different addresses. They have me connected to, all of my different past places of employment, so there are multiple connections to lots of different accounts, and none of them are accurate. And they've got, all of my old credit card information, but they're going to move all of that into the new system. That's not going to help them. So the reality of the situation is that everyone likes to have a clean house, but sometimes it's very difficult and very challenging to clean your data. And it's usually a task that is at least 5 to 10 times harder and longer than you think it's going to be. And it requires the diligence and the attention of the users, of the client. If you're a consultant like myself, I need to have my client work with me to get this done successfully because I don't know the data. And sometimes it's just easier to toss it all in, and sometimes it's just easier to toss it all out and start all over again. Each system is going to be different. Each project is going to be different, but you're always going to ask yourself to clean or not to clean. All right, so you understand the data that you have in your extracts, you understand your target system and your schema, you've created a wonderful data map. You've decided on a certain level of data cleanliness, and now it's time to come up with a particular load order. And how do you want to do this? Well, we have a rule, parents first, inside of Salesforce because we don't want to have any orphan records. So orphan records are sad, and they're sometimes not allowed, depending on the way you've set things up. Sometimes they are allowed, and sometimes not. And when you're looking at your load files, you want to group your records by parents. So you want to load them by families. So for example, and we'll take this this picture here as sort of our working example, and I'll ask you folks to add in some comments. And just another note that reference data are parents too. So as we mentioned earlier about a reference table that contained states and countries, you have to load those first before you load any other table that's referring to them. So let's take a look at this picture here. Seems like we've got a couple of different contact types. We've got doctors, patients, and nurses. And we've got some rooms in the hospital where they might be. And then down below, we've got some drugs and some prescriptions. So things that I might be taking. And then we've got these crazy lines going around. And these are lines that we use to show relationships. So for example, let's take a drug. So down the bottom, the green drug, and then the yellow prescription. Those little notations mean that there is one and only one drug that can be connected to one or more prescriptions. So you can imagine the data that lives behind it. You've got drugs like Advil and Tylenol and Dayquil, and I'm looking at things on my desk. And prescriptions would be, Grace is to take this much Advil this many times a day, and Rachel is to take this much Advil this many times a day. Okay, so the drug will be listed once, and the prescriptions, unique prescriptions, but they will refer to the drugs more than once. All right, so you cool with that notation? So here's an exercise that I like to do with some of my offshore developers when we're playing this game is, what gets loaded first? And how do you figure that out? So who wants to take a stab at it?
We have several people saying drugs. Catherine Sassy said drugs.
Oh, hey, look, there's a chat window.
Yes, there is. I normally monitor that, no worries.
That's fun. And why does everybody leap to drugs? because it's the holidays and we're all crazy. Yeah, drug would be what I would call a primary or a first level object for load. What else? Are there any others?
Doctor, Catherine says.
That says doctor.
We got a room from Sassy.
Doctor, room. Yeah, that's what I would pick too. So look at room, which is the one in the blue. So here the architect made our life easy, right? Because she gave us all of these nice little notations. So there's no little V's on room. So that's my first hint. So there's not going to be more than one room in any of these relationships. So for between room and patient, I see that in this situation, there's one room that could be occupied by more than one patient. So it's like a party hospital. But a patient can only be in one room. Now that makes sense. And then if we look at the relationship between room and nurse, one and only one room is staffed by one or more than one nurses. Pretty cool. So I would say I would also call room a primary object to load. And let's take a look at doctor. So we've got a relationship between doctor and patient where we've got one doctor is connected to multiple patients. This is indeed the state of our healthcare. Now, what it doesn't show you is that a patient could have multiple doctors, but apparently in this model, that doesn't happen. In this model, a patient only has one doctor, but a doctor could have multiple patients. And a doctor can provide multiple prescriptions, but each prescription is connected to only one doctor. Yes, so I would also include doctor as my primary load list. So when you're coming up with your load list, you want to identify all of the parents or the grandparents, and those would be the first files to load. And then when you're loading these files, you want to group them, when you're loading the children, you want to group the children by the parent. So if we're looking at the prescriptions, before we load the prescription, we need to load the doctor, the drug, and one other. Yeah. Sassy's on top of this. Yeah, we need to load the patients. Do we need to load anything before we load patients? Yeah, so here's the tricky thing is before we load patients, we need to load doctors. And before we load patients, we need to load rooms. If you leave the primary care doctor field out now and the room number. So, all right, Catherine Anderson, if we did that, how could we, and this is a valid choice. So if we're loading patients and we leave out the primary care doctor field and the room number and we load the patients, what would our next step be? Does everybody get what she's saying? Load the doctors and the rooms and then update the patient. You got it. That's what I would suggest also. So sometimes due to timelines or resourcing or the availability of data, you may not have rooms and doctors, and you have the patients, and you're under a lot of pressure to just get this data in there, get it in there. So you can load it up and leave those relationship fields out. And then when you get the relationship fields, when you get the doctor or the rooms, you load up that data. You can either do an extract or a quick lookup, and then you update the patient itself. You update the child. Cool. Any questions on this little exercise? Nuh-uh. All right, well, that was fun. I want to make it go there. All right, now let's talk about tools. We talked about data loader, and I've mentioned data loader a little bit. I'm sure that most of you have used or are a little bit familiar with data loader. It's this little application you download and put on your machine. You can connect it to production or a dev sandbox, testing sandbox, and then do inserts. You can do updates, deletes. You can use the batch API or the bulk API or the regular one, and you can get your exports, your export reports as well. Now, sometimes I will say that this is an awesome tool, but sometimes based on where I am and what kind of machine I'm working on, what kind of laptop I'm on, I may not have admin permissions to download this and put it on my machine. In that case, I like to use dataloader.io. Online, same deal, and that's actually the URL, dataloader.io. You log into your Salesforce instance, and you can do all sorts of fun stuff. So it's basically an online version of data loader. Makes my life a little bit easier. And then I put some what I call big girl tools up here. Some of the things that I've used in even just the past year. I'm using Jitterbit right now at this one project, MuleSoft, SQL Server, SSIS. That's a fun thing to use when you don't really have a middleware tool, but you're working with a big SQL Server or a SQL Server shop. Dell Boomi is another enterprise tool, and these have not only data loading capabilities, but they also have lots of translation actions that you can do too when you need to translate your data from a circle to a square so that it goes in the right way. They also have adapters that allow you to snap right into your Salesforce org, and then it pulls down the schema and it gives you this really nice drag and drop interface. So you just drag first name from one table to first name to the other table. It makes it really nice. So with so many tools that are on the market, how do you know which one to use? Well, my theory is you use what you have and you don't go shopping unless you don't have to. Of course, that's my professional opinion. In my personal life, I will always go buy more chapstick if I need it. If I can't find it, I'll go buy it. But when I'm working with clients, my first question is, what do you have? And then sometimes I have to dig a little bit deeper because the people that I'm talking to, even if I'm speaking with like the director of IT and I say, what do you have? You know, she may say, oh, well, we have MuleSoft. And I'll say, well, do you have Informatica? Do you have this? Do you have this? No. And then come to find out a few months later that they actually do have it. She just didn't know about it. So I'd like to find out what's available. What do they have? Can we use it? Are there enough licenses for us to use it? And then what skill sets are available? Because it would be awesome to use, Boomi if they have it. But if we don't have any Boomi developers or anybody with that set of skills, either on my team or on the client team, then it doesn't make any sense to make that choice because we're going to have to hire someone or skill someone up in order to get this done correctly. So what skill sets are available? And for me, it'd be awesome to use Boomi, but I don't know Boomi, and if I'm the only one doing the work, then I'm not going to make that choice. And then I made a note about big tools for big jobs and little tools for little jobs. That's what people seem to think, but not necessarily. Data Loader is not a very big tool, but it does have the capability of handling several million records. It's not the fastest thing, but it can handle it. It can do, the bulk API, the regular API, and it will give you your reports just as much as anything else. The other thing that I kind of liked about the desktop version of the data loader is I can actually script it to run overnight when I need to be really nerdy. Not that I really want to do that anymore, but it's a possibility. You don't always have to go with a big tool when you have a big data set, and just because you have a few hundred records doesn't mean that you can't use this enterprise tool that's available to you. You can certainly use that.
And Grace, Janet had a question. She said, have you ever used Talend? Talend?
Talend. Wait, is there? Oh, there is a question. I minimized my question thing. I have used Talend on my projects. I have not used Talend, but it is pretty cool. It is pretty cool. It did the job. It did what we needed it to do, and it didn't give us any problems. There's another question I saw today in Workbench that you can do unlimited inserts, upserts through I/O. If you buy the license, you can do unlimited inserts and upserts. That is true. Oh, look, and you gave us a picture too, which I'm not going to open.
There's a question that says, what do you recommend for loading files? Working on migration from documents to files.
Oh, for like from Excel files?
Catherine, can you elaborate?
Oh, yeah. Oh, those. That's in one of my gotchas that I just put right here. Oh no, I forgot about attachments. I will confess this is not this has come up in the last couple of projects, and I have visibly shuddered and kicked it over to my tech lead. So I am not the best person to ask that. I could certainly, take a note and follow up on it. I've heard of Magic Mover also. What have you folks all heard about?
I've only heard of Magic Mover, and then the long, arduous process of moving attachments.
Yeah, downloading them, saving them, moving them.
So I've done Magic Mover. I used it for attachments and for notes. It'll move attachments, but not the ones that are attached to email messages.
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah, but those are visible. So if they're on an email, if they're on an email attachment for a case, it'll show up in the case files list. But that's the
okay.
There was a project I was on a little over a year ago, and we were actually using Box. They were moving all of their files. They were not going to put the files. So they had this ancient file management system, and they were going to move to Box, but then we had to surface a portion of those files in Salesforce. And so they were actually working with Box on a utility. And Magic Mover sounds familiar, but I don't remember what it was. But there was some utility that they were using to get all of the junk out of their old, and these were physical servers, like in the back room, to move them to Box, and then surfacing them, just using the Box App Exchange product to surface them in Salesforce.
And with that, we're at the end. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button so we know what content is most helpful to you. Did you learn some tips to help you with your data issues? Comment below. We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you've made it to this point, we want to take an opportunity to say thank you. Since you've stayed with us, here's a bonus. There is a great course on Pluralsight covering Salesforce data management and data integration called Play-by-Play Salesforce Data Management Integration Practices. The link to this course is listed below in the description. Happy learning! Thank you for spending time with us. Please like and subscribe to our channel because we share weekly content to support you on your tech and Salesforce learning journey. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss a new video. We also handpick these videos which we recommend you watch next. Connect with us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and on 100daysoftrailhead.com, all of which are listed below. Thank you for learning with us, and we'll see you back tomorrow.